Hello and welcome back. This is Dark Tower YouTube. My name is Michelle McHugh and I am your host. And here at Dark Tower YouTube, we're doing a deep psychological dive into the magic, the mystery, and the metaphysics of Stephen King's magnum opus, The Dark Tower. We're here today to talk about the drawing of the three, and I'm calling these Roundup episodes where we've read through the drawing of the three, just finished that, and we're going to look at the book as a whole. And we're going to look at it compared to The Gunslinger. And moving forward, we'll do this with every book that we read, comparing it to the books that came before in the best way possible, because it's a lot. It's already a lot. And I had to just say, I'm never going to get it all. I just keep thinking of things and thinking of things. But that's the wonder and that's the magic and mystery of these books, is that they just contain so much more every time you read them. So that's what we're going to be doing in this episode. There are no spoilers going ahead of this of the drawing of the three. So we're going to talk all about the Gunslinger, all about the drawing of the three. So make sure you've read up to the end of the drawing of the three. And then we'll be moving into the Wastelands after this, but no spoilers ahead for y'all out there. What else? Well, I think Ash is here with me, so I have my Dark Tower friend Ash back, thank goodness, because she takes amazing notes and she knows what's up with this series. How are you doing, Ash, today?
Yeah, I'm doing well, and I am excited to get into the drawing of the three.
Me too. Every time I think we do these episodes, I want to do like a little same questions at the beginning in terms of where are we at? What have we learned about the tower? What have we learned about Ka? Anything of these bigger themes that we know are going to be moving throughout the whole series. We'll kind of just check in and see where's the man in black in all of this. Before we do that, I just want to talk about what you thought of the book. Did you like it? Did you hate it? So let me know your thoughts about that.
I definitely really liked it. I think that it is it's sort of like a change of pace from the Gunslinger. I feel like the Gunslinger was a little bit slower paced and really focusing on Roland's like internal world. And while we do still, get that in the drawing of the three, we're also getting more plot, getting new characters, and getting to see some more perspectives, which is really nice.
Yeah, it really is a big change of pace. And people talk about, if you don't like the Gunslinger, just hang in there, because the drawing of the three is so different and it just takes off. Roland loses his fingers on page 3, I believe.
Yeah.
And we are just like,
just immediately getting right into it.
Like, that's what kind of book this is going to be. And we do get, I feel like it slows down a little bit when we get into meeting Odetta.
Yeah.
As opposed to when we go through these doors on the beach, we kind of jump right into Eddie and what he's doing and where he's at, and we're with him there. And then we jump right into Jack Mort.
Yeah.
And with Eddie and Jack Mort, like, we get a little bit of backstory. But when we get into door number 2, the Lady of Shadows, and we go through that door, we don't jump right into Detta and what she's doing. We go back. I mean, we do, but like, we go back and do this whole big thing about who this is and what she's up to. It's a lot more history, I feel like, than these other characters.
For sure, because you're getting the background of like her with her driver and having that sort of talk of her coming back from the civil rights. Yeah, thing that she was involved in.
And the first time I read this book, probably more than that, I was always like, man, this part kind of drags. I just want to get to the action and where's the gunfight? And it was moving so fast. But on this read, spending so much time with Odetta and Detta, I realized how important it was for King to set those two characters up as distinct characters. Yeah. Because as we talked about throughout reading this book, they have to come together. They have to merge. That's the ultimate outcome for them, to birth a new character. But towards the end, we just start seeing them very distinctly showing up in the same body at the same time. and we need to know who's doing what and whose mannerisms are which and who acts like this and who remembers what which way. And so all of that work was necessary by King, quite brilliant, and I just missed it the first few times I read it.
Yeah, and I do also think that specifically because of the way that Detta speaks in that sort of like caricature, King probably found it important to show Odetta first and be like, hey, this isn't like me assuming that this is how everybody talks that's like black. So I think that was probably an important distinction for him to make, because I know that the way that Detta talks is very, very stereotypical and could be viewed as a negative stereotype for sure. So I think that contrast at the very beginning of meeting Odetta is important, probably.
For sure. And that is a thing that comes up with this book all the time. So I'm glad you brought it up. I didn't think to, but I get really mad at people when they just point to Detta Walker as like, this is the reason why Stephen King is a racist. And I'm like, did you even read the book? No, you didn't.
Yeah. I mean, I understand the critiques. I do get that, especially with like, you know, the trope of like magical black person and things like that. So I do understand, you know, there are people that do have valid criticisms, but I think that for this specifically, that there was a plot-driven reason that was like outside of, you know, those other criticisms. So I do think that is like an important distinction.
That's true, and King goes out of his way to let us know that that's not what he thinks black people sound like. He lets it know, like. Yeah, he says it more like Eddie says it at least once, and then another character, I think George, is just like, she talks like a cartoon character. It's so over the top. It's crazy. And so that's King being like, I don't think this is how people talk. I don't think this is how black people talk. But they, of course, someone's going to take it the wrong way. But anyway, it is very important that Detta Walker has a very distinct voice, because we now know the brief glimpse we get into the new character, Susanna, we can see when the Detta part of her is coming and kind of taking over. Yeah. When she is firing those guns and saves them at the end, that's that Detta Walker part of her, because she uses that voice. So again, all of that setup with Odetta Detta really pays off, and will probably continue. We meet Susanna for not a very long amount of time in this book. We don't know anything about her. She doesn't probably know much about herself, because she's a new person and with these two halves that have now merged. But we do see that the parts of Odetta are still there and the parts of Detta are still there. And we can hear that in the dialogue. Mm-hmm. So we both love it, and we could both just talk about how much we love it for the whole episode. But let's move on. And I thought it would be interesting to say, what is this book about? And I came up with some funny answers. I don't know if you would. What would you say if someone said, hey, this drawing of the three, what's that about? How would you even answer that? And it took me like a minute to think, I don't know how I would answer that question.
Yeah, obviously the title kind of explains that we are drawing three characters. However, those characters are up for debate, I think, for sure.
Yep, we're going to get to that. But that's right. If we're just being very, what in the book itself, what is going on? Roland is on his path to the Dark Tower, we think, and he finds two friends to come with him. That's it, right? But then we think, but what is it really about? And so I said, this is a loner cowboy who's suffering physically and psychologically after murdering his only friend. And he makes new friends in this book, but he ultimately decides that he'll probably murder them too.
Yeah.
That's what this book is about.
He's been on his own for a long time, and I think that because of that, he's like, well, if I gotta sacrifice him, I gotta sacrifice him, I guess, because, the Dark Tower is all that matters at this point anyway,
That's right. Yeah, he still is thinking that way. And that's kind of, and then I thought, okay, you could also say Roland makes minuscule progress at
Mm-hmm.
not being a complete and total asshole by admitting that he wants to give and receive love in this book.
For sure. He still has not. He is a man that is very not in touch with his emotions. I feel like those are very separated from how he operates. And so because of that, he's sort of always in like this dissociative state of like, we're doing the here and now because survival is the thing that matters. And he hasn't really been out of survival mode in a very long time, and so because of that, it's hard for him to access those emotions, and so he can think like, I do want to love. He thinks that, but then he's also, his body is fully flat affect, and he's unable to like show that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I found myself throughout this book just saying, like, we're going to give Roland a few brownie points here. He's not where we need him to be. I don't think this is the answer to his problems, but he's trying a little bit, or he's a little bit different here.
Yeah, he's definitely, and I think that, it's fair to say this man has PTSD about any number of things, really. And so, when you've got all of that trauma and like you are made to be this like hard shell of a person, especially if we're talking about a very highly patriarchal society that he grew up in, and especially with, he's basically trained to be a killing machine, and so obviously he's having a hard time getting in touch with that. And I know we talk about, and you talked about in like your roundup, I think, of like the masculine and feminine in the Gunslinger, and I feel like that's an important thing, that Roland is trying to get in touch with his more like feminine side in that way. Isn't there yet, but the first step is saying you want it. So
That's right. And we're going to get to, I have a little more to say about the masculine feminine stuff. I mean, you know what, I think that needs to come up every time. That's probably a question that I found upon this reading of the series really was kind of jumping out to me from the beginning as a massive kind of divide in this character, in terms of, just like you said, this like loner who's a killing machine, who's operating just on a solitary path, and he has feelings of love, but because these things were stripped away from him and he wasn't allowed to experience those things, he just doesn't know what to do with the feelings now. So just like shoves them down, or says, I'll think about that later, maybe, and then never doesn't do it in a good way. But there was a part about the masculine feminine that kind of jumped out to me that wasn't an obvious thing here. And it's at the part where it's at the end of the book, and we're talking about where Roland is in Jack Mort's body, and he's going down to the tracks, and he starts talking about fate. And here's the quote, and then I want to talk about this a little bit in terms of this theme of masculine and feminine. So this is Roland thinking. In matters of the tower, fate became a thing as merciful as the lighter which had saved his life, and as painful as the fire of the miracle had ignited. I have a typo there. That's okay. That's not the important part. Like the wheels of the oncoming train, it followed a course, both logical and crushingly brutal, a course against which only steel and sweetness could stand. Now that jumped out to me because I was like, okay, we've heard a lot about, well, not a lot about, but we've heard about like this deep steel. And we heard about the deep steel and Eddie Dean. And we know that Jake had this thing inside of him, and absolutely Roland does. It's this vendetta, absolutely. This kind of like coldness of the battle that falls over them. And they're going to kill them all, whoever gets in their way. And they're going to feel like this is the right thing to do. And we saw Roland using Eddie's grief in that way to summon up that steel and say, what do you want to do to these people that killed your brother? Do you want to kill them, or whatever that conversation was, which was kind of chilling. But Eddie was like, yeah, I do. So that part I think is pretty obvious. But then for King to throw sweetness in there, I thought, that's kind of interesting. Only steel and sweetness could stand. Not just steel, but sweetness too. And that's something that we don't get tons of that out of Roland.
Right, for sure. And I think that is an interesting sort of dichotomy between Roland and Eddie, is that Eddie does have a lot more of that feminine side. We see that he is more imaginative. He's more open to like giving and receiving love. He's but he also is drawn in a very masculine way to the path of being a gunslinger, basically. He's very drawn to the guns themselves, and sort of, I think he says something like wanting to be a part of its dim and bloody history, when he's first given a gun right before the Balazar shootout. So it's interesting seeing that, and I think that we do also get that with Cuthbert as well.
Cuthbert, yeah.
I've heard it both. Yeah, so well, yeah, so with Cuthbert we also see that sort of like imagination and like that sweeter side. So I think that that's an interesting sort of like callback, because we do see that like throughout this book he is reminded a lot of Cuthbert through Eddie. And I think that was something that, you know, was missing with Roland. And, you know, it talks about him being like romantic, but his more masculine side always like taking over. So yeah.
I agree. And we did hear, and it and the reason, and this is for everybody out there in case you're wondering, because the first time I read this book, you read Cuthbert because that's what it says, that's how it looks like it sounds. But upon rereading in book 4, there is a character that tells us how to pronounce that name. Like King shows us through the character that this is how you say it. And I was like, oh shoot, like that sounds weird, but that's his name. And so I guess I just have to get used to calling him Cuthbert, because that's how King wants us to pronounce it. I think that kind of stuff is funny because there's people in the community that are like, absolutely not. I'm not saying Cuthbert. That's stupid. His name is Cuthbert.
And I do think that because it is like an older, like Middle English or Old English name, there's probably other, like you can probably pronounce it multiple ways. But if that's the way that King wants it done, then that's what we'll stick to, you know.
Way, getting off topic here, but just the same thing with Deschain, and how when Stephen King read Wind Through the Keyhole, I believe, he pronounces it Deschain, and everybody got really mad, and they're like, that's not how you say it. And I'm like, come on, that's how you say it. Sorry. And I did a deep dive somewhere and figured out that Des was meaning kind of like chaotic or not sure where we're going, and then chains meaning bound or trapped. And I'm like, that actually works really well in terms of Roland's last name. So I think King knew what he was doing. Imagine that. Anyway, right. I mean, while we're talking about it, that's kind of, we can lead into the next idea. I mean, I guess just to cap that off, saying we need steel and sweetness, or at least I think King is kind of saying that here. And is that a clue to we need both things, and we're kind of lacking one. We've got a lot of the steel, not a ton of sweetness. We have that with Eddie and Odetta, and then presumably with Susanna, with the two of them. And we do see some moments of Roland and Eddie having this kind of brotherly relationship again that reminds him of his relationship with Cuthbert. So he said Roland used to have this, and he might have it again. And you had brought up the example where they're both super sick and dying, and Roland takes Eddie into his arms and they sleep. And that's very tender and sweet. That is what we're talking about, I think. So we do see that, and other times where Roland rarely smiles or jokes. Mm-hmm. There it is too. But it's so rare that when it happens, everyone's like, what? Right. You know, I'm just thinking of when he claps Eddie on the shoulder, and it says a gesture of affection so rare it made Eddie blink. Yeah. And he's like, what just happened? He touched me. So it's super rare, but Roland's doing it.
Yes, yeah. He's just very out of practice. I mean, you know, he's been on his own for who knows how long, you know, at this point. And so he's not used to even talking to another person, let alone trying to form like a relationship or bond.
Yeah.
He's just been, you know, alone and in survival mode for so long.
Right. And then he has this history of killing people. We saw him kill Jake essentially, and then his other friends aren't around. And in this book, we learned that he killed his friend Elaine, that was under him and Cuthbert's own guns. He's killed his mother. His other friends are dead. We know Susan, we think, died pretty terribly. We don't have a great idea at this point what that looked like, but we're like, Roland knows something about that. He was there or something.
Also Allie, you know, and everybody in total, you know, like, so he's definitely, he says something. I don't know if I pulled the exact quote, but he said, it was something about like how he's not wanting to do these things, but he feels like he's made to do them, so he's going to do it anyway. So he feels like he doesn't have a choice, which, you know, he does, obviously, but if he wants to get to the tower, he thinks that this is the only way, so he's going to continue to sacrifice whoever he has to get there.
Yeah, and that quote I kept pulling for a lot of things. I'm sure we'll get to it at some point in this discussion. But it is this idea of we see Roland moving more into that sweetness in little drips and drabs and ways that are surprising to everybody around him, including the reader. And also, we know of his history where these people don't make it, and he kills many of them, including ones that we've met. And so that creates a decent amount of character, like inner conflict, and then I think conflict for the series as a whole, for us to say, what's he going to do with these friends now? And we'll just have to keep reading to find out. But right, that was kind of bringing me into the discussion, any discussion of Gilead, and well, let's talk about Gilead in terms of his old friends. So we kind of hit that in saying we hear about Cuthbert more than anybody else in this book. That name is brought up quite a few times, but we do hear about Elaine in terms of Roland killed him, and that's just dropped out to us like it was, he was a matricide, and we're like, what? Yeah. That's all you're going to tell us? Yeah. And now he killed his best friend. Cool. Like, what the heck? Okay. We do get the name. We get the name Desmond when he pulls up to the tower, Balazar's tower, and Roland thinks Cuthbert, Elaine, Desmond, it's the tower, I'm here. So that's somebody that we only heard that name once. We haven't heard it again. We'll see what happens with Desmond. And then Susan isn't talked about too much, except towards the end, we recognize that the new character's name is Susanna. And so probably some of you who have been paying attention are like, oh, that's kind of like Susan. Roland is thinking, or somebody tells him, he says when he is calling Eddie and Susanna by his old friend's name. And he says, sometimes Eddie was Cuthbert, sometimes he was Elaine, always the woman was Susan. And so there's our Gilead friends showing up in this book, just in terms of comparing the new characters to the old ones in very small ways. They don't really feature largely here. But that Susanna thing feels like that's not an accident. We know how important the names are in these books. And so I'm sure we'll get more information moving forward. And we do get that Susanna was Odetta Endetta's middle name.
Yeah.
But again, that just feels like kind of Ka-ish.
Very much. Yeah. Anytime there is what seems to be a coincidence in this series, it's always on purpose, and it's always specifically Ka. Yeah.
That's right. So we'll see what that leads to. That's a nice segue into Ka and what we learned about Ka here. Back in the Gunslinger, we had mention of that, and we didn't get a great definition of it, but there was a lot of context cues around it in terms of fate, destiny. If this is what's supposed to happen, it will happen. I think it was used when he met Allie, like it was written that he was going to have sex with her. I think it said it didn't matter if there were grave beetles nesting in her womb. It was written, like Ka had said this was happening. So we got ideas about it like that. And then we also at Dark Tower YouTube talked about how when you dig a little bit, you find that Ka is an ancient Egyptian part of the soul, or part of one's life force. And in this book, that kind of happened where we got more of that sort of flavor of it.
Yes, especially like when we see Roland go through the door for the prisoner, for Eddie. It specifically talks about Eddie's body being a vehicle for Roland's Ka in the moment. So we see that is, as well as fate and destiny, it's very much tied to the soul as well.
That's right. We got more of that with Jack Mort as well, where we're told that divorced of his body, Roland's mind, his Ka, was as healthy and acute as ever. So his Ka functioning independently of his body. And again, just reinforcing that spirit, soul, life force kind of thing. We're told that if Jack Mort was killed, both Roland and Jack Mort's Ka would be expelled into the void of possibilities, which I love. Mm-hmm. So just more definitions for Ka there. And then very specifically, Eddie and Roland are talking, and Roland is like, here, Ka means duty or destiny, or in the Vulgate, a place you must go. So Roland gives us a definition of Ka here as well. So we go, oh, well, it means a lot of things then.
Yeah. It's definitely one of those things that it encompasses multiple very large sort of concepts, and is sort of, I feel like it may not be truly knowable, if that makes sense. Like, that there are so many different facets of it, but that I don't know if we are meant to know exactly what all of it encompasses. In terms of, like, you know, the characters themselves aren't going to be able to know everything about it. It feels sort of like something that maybe we can't fully comprehend.
That's a great way to put it, because already we're talking about life force. That's a huge idea to think about. at the same time meaning fate. So my life force is my fate or
Right.
related to my fate somehow. And then what does that do to the idea of free will? And
Yeah.
then we have to think about Roland and all of this being like you just said, I have to do it this way.
Yeah.
And the audience and his companions being like, do you though?
Right.
So a lot to kind of sort out there, and maybe just, I mean, it's the same thing when if we were going to have a conversation about what does the word soul mean.
Yeah.
We could have a whole seminar about that. I think same thing with Ka, but that's what we got in this book, just some more definitions of it and a different use of the word altogether that was used multiple times in that way. What did we learn about the tower? Not a heck of a lot in this book, right?
Yeah, I mean, we do get like the talking about, so when Eddie asks what it is, Roland says, I don't know that either, except that it may be a kind of a bolt, a central linchpin that holds all of existence together, all existence, all time, and all size. So,
right.
we
And
do
that's
get that.
kind of what we got back in the Gunslinger,
Mm-hmm.
where he didn't call it a linchpin, he calls it a nexus point, I think, for space time. So similar definition there, including the idea of size, which in the Gunslinger we had that revelation from the Man in Black about the importance of size in the whole thing. So not too much more that we know about it, but we did get a couple things that I pulled out were when Roland is saying at the very end of the book that he loves Eddie and Susanna, but he's going to sacrifice them if he needs to for the tower, for the goddamned tower. And so I love that that's tacked on. He doesn't just say, I'll do it for the tower. I'll do it for that goddamn tower. And again, we're kind of shown Roland like, do you even want to go there, bro? Like, doesn't seem like you really do. And why are we going? We still don't know why we're going there. We're not quite sure where it is. We feel like Roland has this vast importance placed on it, but he also kind of hates it.
Yeah.
In this book, we got that idea of duty too. Go ahead.
Yeah. I think he feels that it is his duty and his call to get to the tower, and because of that, and because of his stubbornness and single-mindedness about that, no matter how much of himself or even outside forces are telling him like, hey, you actually don't have to do this, he's like, no, but I do. Like, he doesn't see it as an option to quit, even if it does mean more needless deaths.
Right. So this obligation,
it's
an obligation in a bad way, kind of, to him. We're not clear on it, and we're not super sure that he is, although at the ending, when he's talking to Eddie about the idea of, yeah, you might die, he says, there's more than a world to win, Eddie. I would not risk you and her. I would not have allowed the boy to die if that was all there was. What are you talking about? Everything there is, the gunslinger said calmly. So that made me say, maybe we just don't know yet. That Roland does have this idea that this is a big deal. It's a really big deal. In fact, it's everything there is kind of big deal.
Yeah. And I do think that Roland is obviously known for keeping his cards very close to his chest, especially if he thinks that he might have to sacrifice these people. Obviously, he's not going to want to like show his hand completely. But at the same time, that does cause a lot of like distrust between him and Eddie, and especially Detta before Susanna's like sort of integrated. And I think that Roland may even be trying to keep that sort of away from himself, if that makes sense, like sort of not telling himself everything as well, just because it's easier to not have to think about it.
That's a good point that he does. There might be a delivery coming, guys, so the dog might bark, but we'll see. He does, when he's uncomfortable in his thinking about things that he doesn't want to think about, he is like just repressing. Why am I thinking about that? He compartmentalizes it, we're told. He doesn't react emotionally to it. So he could be doing that with the tower, like you're saying. But anything else about the tower that you want to talk about before we move on?
I think so.
I think we kind of hit it. There's just not that much in this book about that. This is really about the lead up, hopefully, to more information about the tower. We're just kind of gathering the crew, we think, as it were. We did talk about drawing, and so let's kind of move to that because that's the name of the book, the drawing of the three. So who are the drawing of the three? Who are the drawn three?
Yeah, so it could be the three characters that like are in the doors. So it could be referring to Eddie, Odetta/Detta, and Jack Mort. Or it could be referring to specifically Susanna, Odetta, and Detta. It could also, I mean, that it's sort of open to, up for debate, which way you see it. I mean, do you think that there are any other characters that it could be at this point?
I mean, at the end of the book, we're left with Susanna, Eddie, Roland.
Yeah.
So is that the drawn three? And then we have Roland doing that thing in the Jack Mort section where he's like, I know I'm the third one. And he seems pretty sure about that. Is he right? Do we know that he's right? We don't know, but he didn't draw Jack. Roland decided that Jack was going to be a sacrifice, and that's how it went. I wonder, and we'll never know, but I wonder about this idea of the card game and the shuffling of these chapters, and if that's part of the deal of like we shuffled, we reshuffled, and then we had final shuffle. And in that reshuffle or final shuffle, was it like, are we drawing Jack Mort or what? What's going to happen? Right. Who are the final three? He also then says about Susanna Odetta, like he says, I can't find the notes right now, but it's like there was Odetta, and then there was Susanna, and then Roland drew a third from those two. Mm-hmm. And King is using that language specifically to say 1, 2, 3. Yeah. So, yeah, it's open to debate. I think there's more than one answer there, which is cool, really, and in keeping with the idea of kind of shuffling the deck and who's going to come up on top. We do end with 3 characters, and one of them happens to be Roland. So there you have it. We have other drawing uses of the word draw in this book, though. It's not just who's being drawn in those 3 doors. So we have the idea of drawing of a gun. And in keeping with I was thinking about this a lot. We have this, we'll talk about kind of, I guess we can kind of move into the games part too, where we're talking about the idea of cards being a theme, games being a theme. The book's set up in this way of like shuffle, reshuffle, final shuffle. Mm-hmm. And what does final shuffle mean? What is it telling us? Like, why is it called final shuffle? And do you have any deep thoughts about that?
I personally saw it as a continuation of the tarot motif from the
Mhm.
Gunslinger, specifically the end of the Gunslinger. I mean, we get the Man in Black doing the tarot reading and drawing these cards for Roland, who then, in this book is drawing those characters. So I do think that maybe what it was referring to is like specifically in the tarot sort of way, but there's also, I mean, it could be just another card game like poker, or I think in this universe it's called Watch Me. So it could be something like that as well. But that's sort of how I took it, was along with that tarot motif. What do you think?
I thought of a few things. I mean, I thought when you the final shuffle, the game is about to begin. So I feel like maybe in terms
Okay.
of books, we're at that point where we're going to move the action forward in some way. Like we've been
Yeah.
preparing, we're shuffling, final shuffle's over. And
Yeah,
now what's the game? What's next? So I thought about that.
that makes sense. And then, yeah, I think also we sort of, at the end of drawing of the three, we're sort of set up with like, okay, all of the players are on the board at this point. Obviously, later on, I'm not gonna go into specifics, but there are more characters that come and go, but we have sort of been introduced to the central ones by the end of this book.
Right. Right. And it feels, I don't think that's a spoiler to say. I mean, it would be maybe, I don't know. Stephen King could probably write 4,000 pages about the same three characters and keep it interesting if
Right?
anybody could. Probably we're going to see some other people in this 4,000 page series. I think that's fair to say. The other thing I thought about was how in the final shuffle chapter,
Mm-hmm.
well, before I go there, because I think that's a big one, let me end with the big one. But then the other thing I thought about was the shuffling of where are we going to land with Roland's feelings about love, because that's been this theme throughout Gunslinger and Drawing of the Three, where Roland has this conflict and he has to sacrifice people, but he loves them, but he's still going to let them die. And we've been rooting for him all along to just be like, dude, you can't kill everybody. And he knows it because he's always like, I can't get to the tower like a monster. And we see
Yeah.
that coming up a lot in this book as well. So it could be like, where is he landing with all of this in terms of that idea? Because that's going to dictate how this goes for him moving forward. Either way, how, where is he going to land there? So I think that kind of could be part of it. Who knows? We're just spitballing. But related to that is the conversation that he has with Eddie. And that conversation, I mean, guys, like just go reread that whole chapter, the whole thing. I just wanted to pull out and go through line by line because there's so much in there about these characters and what they're doing and where they've been and where they're going and like foreshadowing and like there's so much in there. But this conversation, Roland and Eddie are talking, and Roland's like, "Yeah, I'm going to sacrifice you if I have to," and he's just kind of cold about it. He's not very emotional. He's like, "That's life. That's life on the path to the tower. Sorry, not even
Mm-hmm.
sorry though." And so Eddie's kind of getting mad, and he says, "Who's going to come through some magic door and save you, man? Do you know? I do. No one. You drew all you could draw. Only thing you can draw from now on is a fucking gun because that's all you got left, just like Balazar." And I thought, okay, so we're in the final shuffle in the drawing of the three, and Eddie's saying, "You've drawn all you can draw." Like, so that feels kind of like, I don't think that's an accident. You drew all you could draw. Only thing now is the gun. And he compares him to Balasar. He compares him to a
Yeah.
baddie from this book, and just getting back at that idea, like you're screwed if that's really where you're at with all of this.
Right. Because I mean, I
Mm,
think especially from Eddie's perspective, he's like, okay, so you went through all of this to get us, and now you're just saying you're gonna like throw us away. Like this was your second chance, or however many second chances you've had, and this is kind of the end of the line. And I think that's obviously there's frustration there, but I think that anger is sort of needed to like break through to Roland, because he is so like emotionally detached in general.
Right. And it has been a central idea of a conflict of this character where we're being shown Eddie's pointing it out to him. So this is the thing that needs to change, Roland. Like, this is your big problem that we need to work out over the course of this series. And, no offense, Roland, but you didn't do a great job here in this book. There's little bits. We gave you a lot of brownie points, but you didn't do it by any means. Now we still have 5 books, so that's fine. But also when we got to, I just imagine like reading this for the first time and getting to that part where he's like, oh yeah, I love you and I'll kill you if I have to. And I'm like, damn it. Like, no, stop. I love you. And that's it. And that's, you don't have to say anything else, but that's where he's at. And I'm like, okay, but at least he's saying it out loud, because he never told Jake that he loved him. He said it, or he thought it, or he said it out loud after Jake was dead, but he never said to Jake, I love you. And he's saying it to these characters, or he's saying it to Eddie, I love you both. And then we're told that he loves Susanna already because of the things that she's bringing. So that's a quick kind of move to love for Roland, I would say. We don't know this woman. We don't know what she's going to do, but it's like he already loves her. He does love Eddie. So a little grace for Roland. And what does he have left to draw on in this final shuffle? And how is he going to move forward? So I think that's kind of brilliant on King's part. And I love these deep reads because it makes me go, I wonder if he did that on purpose. Like, of course he did, because it makes total sense. Okay, so speaking about that, I brought up this question I didn't do it in the roundup of the Gunslinger, I should have, but I did it during the series. And this channel is very small, but it's growing in drips and drabs, and this was when really nobody was listening, and I had people get mad about me asking about how Stephen King feels about guns. And I'm kind of like, in the Gunslinger, there's quite a few bits of text here that is pointing to the idea that guns aren't this like big mighty thing that everybody loves and are so cool. Sorry, guys. And they're like, no, that's not what he said. And I'm like, yeah, he did. And here's the text to prove it. So I wanted to just kind of revisit that. And we don't get too much. Like, you pulled something out that I'll let you share. And then I'm just going to use that same example here at the end of this book where Eddie's like, you're drawing on a gun. Big deal. Like, you're just like Balazar. That's nothing. And that's not the answer, essentially, kind of judging the idea of his guns as like not what we need to make it through. So I felt like that's kind of a commentary. And then you found that part where he's going to be in the shootout at Balazar's. I can read it if you didn't find it.
Yeah, go ahead.
He says, so this is Eddie. Roland's giving him his gun because he can't use it because his fingers are gone. And this is Eddie's response. He's like, I don't know how to shoot a gun. I've never done that. Yet there was some part of him that wanted to hold it, that responded to its perfectly expressed purpose, that sensed its dim and bloody history and wanted to be a part of it. And that's what you brought up earlier.
Yeah.
That's the deep steel. That's the gunslinger. You can't have a gunslinger without a gun.
Right. Yeah. There's definitely something to be said about how the characters, like these characters specifically, are very drawn to it, even if, they're disturbed by the idea at first. Like, as soon as they like feel the gun, they're like, oh, this is like, this is something that I want, which is certainly interesting.
Right. And that idea of the steel and the sweetness, which I think we get in this model of Detta and Odetta merging. We have the nonviolence and the violence. We have Odetta at the beginning of this book just being like, there's no difference between good shooters and bad shooters. We don't shoot. I don't shoot. We're nonviolent resistance only. And then at the end of the book, Detta grabbing the gun, shooting the lobsters, and saving Eddie and Roland because they would be dead with nonviolent resistance.
Yeah.
So that idea of, if we could kind of say nonviolent resistance is more of the sweetness or more of the feminine, and violent resistance maybe is more of the masculine or the deep steel, we need a better balance of that, perhaps, as we think Susanna may show us as we go forward. Would you say that's fair to kind of say masculine, feminine, violence, nonviolent?
I mean, I think specifically talking about like the archetypal masculine and feminine, not necessarily being like what we would think of as like in our society being masculine versus feminine, but those ideas of like logic and reason versus imagination, things like that, where you're sort of, and everybody sort of needs to have a combination of both in order to, you know, be a whole, like, healthy individual.
Yeah, that's right. Everybody does need a balance of these things. So I guess the question is, do gunslingers need a balance as well? And I think King, with that, the only way we can kind of beat this thing is steel and sweetness, throwing that in there for us, saying, yeah, we do actually need a balance. And then taking that character of Susanna and saying, look, there's a balance here. How is that going to play out for her, for them? We'll have to see, but it happened. It happened. And this book is also about split people with two sides to them. So Odetta and Detta being the very obvious manifestation of that. But of course, we have Roland's two sides going on in this book, and the man in black. I mean, let's talk about him. So that's another person we need to check in on and say, where are we at with the man in black? What did we learn about him, or any other nemesis wizards in this book? So the man in black, we don't see him physically in this book, but we see him take up residence inside of Roland.
Yeah, Roland definitely uses him as sort of an inner voice for his thoughts that he would like to distance himself from. So any of the thoughts about sacrificing these people and, like, you know, just anything that he feels is sort of treacherous territory, I think, is where the man in black has sort of been used in his mind.
So we see quite a bit of that in the first few chapters. And King points out that this is Roland. And he says, but the shrieking laughter of the man in black, the man who was dead but lived on as the gunslinger's stained conscience, would not let him go on with the thought. So that's King being like, this is Roland's conscience, his bad part of his mind that is talking to him right now. Which makes sense when we're thinking about, there's splits going on here with every single character in this book. And there's...
Yeah. And I mean, there's even more splits than just... It's more than just people being, like, two different sides. I feel like, you know, we pulling quotes about the inner voices. We do see a lot of characters have multiple different inner voices that they sort of have used to express those different, like, warring thoughts in their minds.
That's a great point. It's not just two halves. There's people contain a multitude, and we see that with all kinds of characters with all kinds of voices. So That's one way the Man in Black shows up. I do want to mention this part where we have Roland mentioning a new demon that called himself Flag. And he talks about seeing him near the end of Gilead with Dennis and Thomas hot on Flag's heels. And when I talked about this in the episode, I said, this is, if you don't know, this is a reference to the book The Eyes of the Dragon. This is the part in the drawing of the three. If you're wondering, oh, why do I have to read that book? You don't. That's it right there. But King is pulling that character into this one. And so I don't think it's a spoiler. It's like Flag is showing up in The Eyes of the Dragon. There you have it. And then people are like, even if you haven't read The Stand, it's like you've watched one of the mini series and you're like, oh, Flag, right? So we don't know much about that in the Dark Tower series. But King is like, there's this guy too. So we're just paying attention to that and saying, oh, okay, got it. Flag is another demon. Yeah. And King groups him into this paragraph he starts by talking about the demon wizard Flag pretending to be a man. And then there had been the Man in Black. And then there had been Martin. So King is kind of making that triad of bad wizards in that paragraph. So just, what does it mean? We don't know, but it happened. And so we're just paying attention to that, just bookmarking that as we move along our travels. Okay, we're already almost at an hour, but we still have a few things I think that are critical to talk about here. How much time do you have left? I don't even know what time it is.
Oh, you're good. I'm okay.
Good. Okay. Let's talk about the magic doors very quickly, just to say they exist. In the Gunslinger, we had Jake moving between worlds, and the door was death. And we had the Man in Black talking like he was moving between worlds as well, although he didn't specify how he was doing that.
Right.
And here we have literal doors to another world.
Right. We also don't know who put the doors there. That's something that we're just, we're told like, hey, these exist. And that's sort of all we get about it in terms of like, why are they here? Like, yes, it's Cod's, fate, it's destiny, but also we don't really know who is pulling these strings. We don't know if, like, at this point, was this set up by the Man in Black, like, post their, conversation in the Gunslinger? Is this set up by the Tower? Is it like, we don't really know. We just know, like, these doors are here. You can go between worlds when they show up, go through.
Right. And they did have rules that we explored. So we found out, all three of them happened to open on New York City, which tells us that that's probably an important location. And it definitely was in this book. We could imagine that it could be going forward. We'll see. But we could move back and forth through these doors, but we couldn't. Roland could carry stuff from New York City into Roland's world and stuff from New York City back into into Roland's world, and then back out of Roland's world, back into New York City. But he couldn't carry his shit into New York City. Right. So he did that experiment just to show us some rules about the doors. So that's how these doors worked. Why?
Yeah. Well, and, obviously there's, for these three doors specifically that showed up on his path, he can't physically take himself. Like, his body is dropped and he's basically like astral projecting his ka into another person's mind, which is clearly different from the type of door that Jake went. Oh, where'd you go?
Are you okay? Am I here?
Oh, there you are.
Good.
Sorry.
Okay, great.
Just the door that Jake went into was obviously he took his whole self, his whole body, and like he died in his world and showed up in Roland's. So we don't know if we don't really know why there's a difference between those, but we do know that there are different types of doors that have different rules, basically.
That's right. So we're just going to kind of bookmark that knowledge. And also, it was like Roland and Eddie could come through together if they were touching. So we learned that.
Yeah.
But then, the part where Roland's trying to get Eddie to go through the door with him, I was like, well, are they both going to go through physically then, I guess, and then neither one of them's going to be on the beach to be got by Detta, and that's maybe what Roland was trying to do. I don't know, but it didn't work in any event. But just to say, they could move physically through, but only Roland could go through, but only together. Could any of those other people go through on their own? I doubt it. I don't think so. But magic doors, magic rules for those doors. Another big deal was Stephen King inserting himself into the story, and so he references The Shining twice, not just once, but twice, and we're like, oh,
yeah.
And that, so The Shining, the movie based on the Stephen King book. So we're like, okay, so Eddie Dean living in a world where Stephen King exists. And Stephen King putting himself in front of Eddie and then in front of us, the reader, which is interesting.
Yeah, that's sort of our first mention of that in the series, of him showing up as a person that exists in this world.
That's right. And he also kind of showed up a few times saying it never would have crossed Roland's mind to think this thing. And it would pull you, when you're reading, it kind of pulls you out because you're like, Stephen King knows that Roland didn't think this thing. Roland doesn't know it. He'd never even, because he's not the kind of character who would think about that. But King's like, but I know, and I'm telling you. So there's a couple of moments like that in this book. And so that also feels like the voice of the narrator got a little stronger and more noticeable at the points, right?
Definitely. Yeah. And specifically when we're getting sort of the memories of Odetta's father, we get King saying Roland would have understood. So that there are some other places where you're sort of getting that meta commentary from King.
Yes, and that's cool. And is that just a feature of this book, the way that he's talking to this book? Will we see that going forward? But again, we're just bookmarking some things here that felt different, interesting, captured our brain a little bit. Roland's damnation is kind of a theme going forward. We've talked about that a little bit and just saying that he feels like this is his duty, but that word damned is used quite a few times. So where Roland at the beginning has met Eddie and he's like, oh, thank God Eddie is here. And then he hears the voice of his father being like, you got to sacrifice him. Don't be nice to him or whatever.
Right. Don't put your heart in his hand.
Don't make the mistake of putting your heart near his hand. And Roland says, I'm damned for my duty. And why should the damned turn aside? So again, we're kind of like, is that really how it has to be? We don't know, but we don't like that. And then at the end, we have, again, a little bit of glimmer of hope here where Eddie is saying to Roland, the one thing my brother taught me. And Roland's like, what? He's actually interested. And Eddie says, he taught me if you kill what you love, you're damned. I'm damned already, Roland said. But perhaps even the damned may be saved. And the last dialogue that we get in the book is Roland saying, even the damned love. And then we get the last little chapter, which is his dream, where he has damnation, ? Salvation, ? The tower. What do you think about all of that?
Oh, man. I think that, it's clear that Roland believes he is damned. But he's in this sort of conflicting thought where, like, he doesn't want to be. He feels like he didn't choose this, and so it's interesting seeing him sort of trying to grapple with, like, he assumed that he was damned and that was it, but maybe it doesn't have to be, is sort of how we're seeing his thinking, like, ending up at the end of the book.
Right. So we're like, okay, yeah, maybe you are, maybe you're not, but at least you're putting question marks after it at this point. And
right.
I'm damned, but I still love you. Okay, so that's kind of a big deal here. It kind of fits into the idea of this theme that we picked up in the Gunslinger about arriving at the tower as a monster. So I'm damned, but if you have given up your heart for the tower, Roland, you have already lost. A heartless creature is a loveless creature, and a loveless creature is a beast. So those kind of ideas, I think, are on a similar theme here that we've just been talking about again and again. And if it keeps coming up like this, it's very important to this character and probably to the series as a whole, right? So that's that. I don't know, maybe like one more thing. Oh, what's the one more thing we really need to talk about was what did we learn about gunslingers in this book? Because in the Gunslinger, we didn't learn too much. We're like, okay, they're really good at shooting. They have this kind of like honor culture. He's related to King Arthur, but Roland just blows the whole town away and then kills a kid. Is that what gunslingers do? Well, we get more in this last part with Jack Mort, right? And Roland's kind of looking at the policemen and he's calling them gunslingers.
Yeah.
And do you want to talk about it?
Oh, no, go ahead.
Just going to say he looks at them and he's really mad, like furious at the way that they're operating. And he's calling them like soft and fat and not observant, or all these mean things.
Yeah.
But then he gets furious when they shoot into the drugstore with their scatter rifles, as he calls it. And he's like, there's innocent people in here. What are they doing? Their brains must be scrambled from when I hit them in the head. Better that than to think that this is the way that a gunslinger is going to operate. So that's cool because it's that action sequence is my favorite ever. It's my favorite thing ever. So it's just interesting and fun to read. But we are getting this subtext about what is a gunslinger in Roland's world. And we do get this sense like, oh, there is this code that they're supposed to be following. And they are supposed to be protecting innocent people. And it's actually outrageous if they're operating in a way that could put anybody in the line of danger who wasn't supposed to be there. And so much so that he says to the one unconscious cop, you have forgotten the face of your father. And kind of calling out the gunslinger code on this man that he's like, you're not doing a good job. So I feel like that tells us a lot without directly telling us what that culture was like.
Well, and I mean, he even, like, in that section talks about how if this is how gunslingers are in this world, then he prefers his own world, like, even through all of the hardship and everything, because he just can't comprehend gunslingers without a code.
Yeah, not good. Not good. All right.
But I do think that's also
Go ahead. Say that again.
I was just saying, I do think it's also interesting, though, that he calls out, like, okay, you're hurting innocent people, yet he has also hurt innocent people. He's also, and I think that there's some cognitive dissonance there. He thinks that it was necessary for his quest, so it's okay if innocent people die if it's for the greater good. But so he's definitely got that, like, he's judging them for things that he has also done.
Yeah, and that's on brand for Roland. is just to be like, it's you, it's you, it's you, it's Walter, it's Martin, it's Hax the cook. Like, it's never
anybody
him.
but me.
And when like Jake calls him out, Eddie calls him out, and he gets really mad when anybody's like, "No, dude, I think it's." He's like, it's so funny. Everybody else can see it except he can't see it. Yeah, there was more notes here. I mean, we didn't talk a lot about Jack Mort, but I did have some thoughts. I mean, just really quickly about the similarities and differences between those two characters, and how, you know, Jack Mort had that nice thing about like the ripples. He's going to push something in the ripples and it's going to change the entire universe, kind of like the butterfly effect of it all. And I'm like, okay, but then Roland doesn't push Jake, and we have that same thing happening. So like the ripple effect from the non-pushing is brought to our attention again by Stephen King, who says it didn't even cross Roland's mind until later to think about the possible paradox here, or what would happen if Jake didn't get hit by that car. That the end of his quest would have been one of those thoughts never even crossed Roland's mind. But King is saying that to us to be like, there's ripple effects here, guys. And Roland should be thinking about that. And so he's not, but you should be. So I think that's just important to kind of call out in terms of heading into the next book, because we're kind of set up for like those thoughts of the paradox wouldn't come until later, is what King tells us. And so we don't get that in this book. So we're assuming that we're going to get that in the next book. Yeah, and then just ending with a new character of Susanna and just feeling like we have no idea really who this is.
Yeah.
Roland loves her.
I mean, yeah. So does Eddie. So they're just, we don't know. I mean, we can assume it's hopefully the best parts of Odetta and Detta together, but, you know, at this point, we don't really know.
We don't know. And we hopefully will find out. The thing I want to end on is the character that we haven't talked about, except we just did a little bit of, is Jake, who's not in this book at all, but he is. And when I did a search for the name Jake in this book, it came up quite a lot. So that we remember at the beginning, of course, Roland is punishing himself, wishing he were dead, dreaming of Jake. But he's thinking about Jake a lot as we go through the book. And then, of course, Jake does show up kind of, sort of, a little bit in that last door, which everybody's like, oh my God, it's Jake. Like, that was a heart-stopping moment for me the first time I read the book. What about you? Do you remember?
Yeah, I mean, it was just, and seeing that it was the same person that both did that and was the reason that Odetta lost her legs, and also the reason that Detta really existed at all, because that sort of really happened after she was hit with, I think it was a brick that he threw down from a building.
Yeah.
So he's sort of, he's the reason that Detta exists, and he's the reason that Jake even went to Roland's world, and so he's a very important character, even though we don't really see a lot of him.
Yeah, I think so too. And that thing that he talks about with the ripple effects, and has his like delusions of grandeur. I'm like, and he's right. Like he absolutely is like a key figure to this whole book.
Yeah, I do think that, you know, he views it from like the egotistical, like narcissistic, like I am creating fate by doing this, when really he's an instrument of fate. It's not something that he is necessarily doing of his own. I mean, yes, he's doing it of his own free will, but he doesn't even realize how important he is in this bigger thing, but also how insignificant he is. Because if it wasn't him, it would be someone else, because these things did have to happen, you know, in order for this to be set up. Like, it's Ka. And so it's interesting seeing sort of that, like, yes, he is extremely instrumental, but also very small at the same time.
Yeah. And he will never know because he's dead. And maybe we'll see him again. In this series, anything is possible, but that's it. Again, we could talk about this for hours and hours, I think, but I think it's time to wrap it up. Thank you so much for joining me, because I think this was awesome and fun, and I think we hit the big ones that we needed to hit. We'll hit them again with the Wasteland, same kind of question. So as you're I think you're already probably close to being done that one, but as I'm reading, I'm going to be thinking about these questions that we'll hit every time. Stay tuned, everybody. We're going to go through the Wastelands and Tower Junkies only. There'll be an episode for you somewhere along the line about things with the spoilers. So thanks, everybody out there. We love you. We love talking about this. We want to hear your comments, your thoughts, your questions. Where did we get it wrong? What did we forget? Thanks for liking. Thanks for subscribing, all that good YouTube stuff. And until we meet again, may you have long days and pleasant nights.